Hey, this is Paulo, and this is Mind Your Own Business. Hello, welcome everybody. I'm excited for today. I have Deborah here. We're going to talk about mindset, how to how to recover or bounce back from failure, and many other things that are very important nowadays, especially. So, Deborah, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for being here and being with us. So just to start the conversation, who do you help?
There are a number of different groups that I help. First, I help trainers learn how to design and deliver skill building training that engages participants so that they see results. I help managers learn how to assign, motivate, build teams, manage conflict, delegate, be effective as managers, particularly those who've been promoted from technical positions and don't have the management and interpersonal skills. Excuse me. I help employees learn interpersonal skills and self management skills like stress management, time management, conflict management, assertiveness. And I also help organizations who have highly technical curriculum that is not being received very effectively. And I redesign that so that people understand what the message is and will do what's necessary. So I help.
And I'm curious, across the board, what have you seen is the our biggest lack or flaw, like lack of skills in general, yeah.
I would say emotional intelligence. That it's not that people necessarily lack empathy or lack an interest in communicating well, but a lot of people don't know how to do that. And they also, as current events show, don't know how to manage conflict.
And are there two or three like things we can do to improve our emotional intelligence?
The first is being aware, but I think we have a lot of damaged folks. I teach assertiveness. That's the first thing I ever taught. And part of that is looking at self esteem. And many of us look for our self esteem outside ourselves. And then we don't get that. Or somebody says, you're not very nice, Pablo. And it hits us at our core because I thought I was nice. I've always worried if I wasn't nice. Now somebody's telling me I'm not nice, and we calamitize, make it worse, get very defensive. So, recognizing what our triggers are and doing something about that. And that comes from accepting who we are.
That's so important, Deborah. I think it could lead to an a very good position, work related or not, like with your family or anything, or a very dark place or difficult place. Um, so yeah, and what motivated you to the creation of your business, or what's your why?
I was an abused child and I was an abused wife. And I started the first feminist theater in the Midwest with another woman. And we were doing a play about how the feminist movement was affecting women. This was in the early 70s, before you were born. And After the play, we would open it up for conversation with the audience. And two women professors from the university there who were in family studies, because this predated women's studies, came up to me and said, "We'd like you to teach assertiveness." And I said, "What is that?" And they said, "That's what you're doing. Read this book." And I think before I told you, there wasn't a book that made a difference in my life, but truly that was one that made a difference because I started to understand my motivations, understand that I had rights, that I did not have to be a victim. And so my first career was teaching assertiveness to women, to nurses, and then later to doctors who were having a problem with nurses who who are the first who know better than anybody else what's happening with the patient. They're with them all the time. Um, and so all of the training that I do is to help people find that light in themselves, to build some sense of competence, but to be confident about that so that they can use the skills that they have and do that freely and comfortably and effectively.
That's that's so that's powerful. And I'm curious, like, you've seen the evolution of the, not the whole feminist movement, but part of it. What have you seen? Not going to the feminist like conversation, but about the difference between starting your work in the 70s, 80s, 90s, so on and so forth. What have you seen? Is there a trend? Is there a change? Are we leaning towards some direction, or it's been the same?
Well, there's a number of things that have changed. When I started, there was no way for a woman to get a business loan. The banks wouldn't even talk to you. That's not the case anymore, from what I understand. Um, we still don't have equal pay for equal work. There is still discrimination, which is incredibly distressing. You know, looking at it 40 years later. Um, but the younger women, let me put it this way, when I started my business, my choices were very limited, and women's choices were quite limited. Now we keep saying, we have our first woman this and our first Black woman that, which is it's great that there's a first, but it would have been nice if that first had happened 40 years ago. And for some it did, but they weren't uh, applauded. And um, you're asking me what has changed. A lot and a little, depending on what you're looking at. I think that there is still the likelihood that if a woman is at the front desk, there's an assumption that she's administrative staff as opposed or support staff rather than a partner or the professional, which is truly not the case. Some positions, I started in a typing pool. We don't tend to have those anymore. People have to do their own typing and things like that. So I think I'm rambling.
I mean, yeah, it was just a question that came to my mind, like after a fair amount of years, maybe you have a, I'm sure, maybe not maybe, I'm sure you have a general, overview and perspective of the evolution of what we're living. Because I see this, but maybe you see, the whole picture. Look, of course, I say this because I am biased, because I am a man, because I was born in a different, year, live different experiences. So yes, I'm not saying that it's good or bad, simply just different, right? But I think your picture of things will help us young people, like starting in our careers, younger women, younger men, to have a different perspective of what was like living like back in the 70s. Like it was different, and how it is today, and where are we going. So sounds like, yep.
Well, I can give you one example. I worked for a state agency where all of the men were white men professionals, all of the women, regarding their degree, and I had my master's degree, by the way, were in the typing pool. And they would literally knock you out of the way if you were in the way. We're talking about physically knocking you out
Oh,
of the way.
really?
I don't think that there are many women today who would stand for that. So, in terms of being assertive, I'm always surprised and elated to see that women stand up for many women will stand up for themselves. That doesn't mean we still don't have abused children and abused wives, because we do. But there is a recognition of that, and there are resources for that, which weren't available to me when I needed them. So society has, women have made a huge difference in terms of the direction of our society. And they say that women are much better leaders because we are empathetic. But, and we have a lot more women leaders. We have finally have women in Congress in numbers. So things are changing, but they're changing incredibly slowly.
And going, maybe pivoting a little bit the conversation and going back to our professional lives, like for everybody, right? Or yeah, could be also for, especially for women, but I'm talking about assertiveness, confidence. Like what advice would you give to a person who's starting out, or who's stuck, or who like don't know where to start, or where to look? Maybe they're thinking about doing some changes, they're not happy, they have poor self-confidence, and they just don't have the tools. Yes, they do have, I don't know, YouTube, and there are resources online, I imagine, but might be overwhelming, like too much information. I don't know which direction to go. So what advice would you give to a person who's starting out?
It's going to be different depending on who the person is. There's no one catch all. Having some support network, whether it's a good friend or it's a group, I think makes a huge difference because it lessens the sense of isolation, and helps reflect back to you, what you're capable of doing. Because many of us in those darkest nights wonder if we make any difference, if we can do anything. And it helps to have support. There are certainly good books if somebody learns that way. You've mentioned YouTubes, there's support groups. Um, if they're starting a business, the small business development centers in the universities offer free counseling, and they also offer classes. Um, and you can take assertiveness classes. You can take interpersonal communication or conflict management classes. And any of those things, if that's how you learn, can make a huge, huge difference.
And is this something you like? I'm thinking about how long it would take for me to learn assertiveness. Let's say I am going to share a little bit about myself over here. I was uh, so my dad was how to say this. Sometimes he was emotionally abusive with me. Not physically, he never like touched me or anything, but emotionally, he would play with my feelings when I was a kid so easy because most of the time he was drunk. So that happens, and I'm sure there are cases out there that are worse. I don't mean to compare because everybody is different, of course. But I'm just thinking about you go back to your own case and to your own situation and say how long it would take for me to actually develop a great self-esteem or, or a stable or yes or assertiveness. So I'm saying this. There's a follow-up question. I'm asking this. I'm sorry. I'm sharing this story or this piece of information because I think maybe for me it would take a long time. Like it's a year, it's a years, it's years of process. But I'm not sure. I haven't actually, to be honest, I haven't taken any courses or anything. Is that something that takes a lot of time?
It depends. A lot of what we deal with is that noise in our head that repeats certain nasty things, things we wouldn't say to friends, but they're things people told. My father, when I was growing up, said, for a smart person, you're very stupid. Well, that sticks in the head, and then you start to second guess anything that you do because am I being stupid? Yes, I must be stupid. I was 42 when I went to what's called the Hoffman Quadrinity process, which is a very intensive program that helps you get in touch with your emotional side, your intellectual side, your physical side, and your spiritual side. And it starts by having you identify what are the messages you grew up with and who told them to you or who showed them to you and how did they impact you. And working from there, you're able to start to see, okay, I'm not those messages. I have choices. And when I started that, I could not say that I loved myself. I literally couldn't say those words. And at the end of that 7-day intensive program, I could say it. So if somebody, and they have scholarships for it, it's not a cult. The reason I went to it was because they had a meeting and the people who walked in the door, you could tell who had done the process because they looked so calm. You saw other people who, like me, were pretty upset. And when they said, "I don't hear that noise in my head anymore," I thought, "Okay, sign me up." Now that worked for me. It's worked for friends of mine. Whether that's something that somebody is willing to go through, I don't know. And I'm sure there are other kinds of intensive programs that might be just as effective. I lived with those feelings until I was 42. And I was raising two children with those feelings. So
And you had that desire to go to the to this program still. Like you would think that yes, I already had two kids. I am 42 years old. Maybe it's not the right time to go to this place, but precisely that's could be actually the best time to go. And if someone out there is hesitant of taking action just to have to build this self-awareness and to discover yourself, don't like this is the right time, go do it. There is no perfect time to jump into the pool. So, and going back to the inner voice, it's funny. I'm going to share another story. I'm getting personal here, but my dad and my mom, they got divorced, of course, and during the divorcing process, my mom said to me, I was 8, something like that. She told me, ah, you know, it's just stay single. Like it's better, you're better off alone. And that phrase, that you're better off alone, to this day, I live with it and I hear it here, and it's hard for me to have a healthy, good relationship. I'm talking about intimate relationship, of course. Um, and when you say that inner voice, that inner child, I always go back to this phrase and think I need to work hard or just work on that because yeah, it shaped my life.
Well, the thing about children is we take things literally. And your mother was talking out of pain based on one situation. But as a child, we take that in, and that's a universal truth. And until we are aware of it and we look at it and are able to say, okay, that was a circumstance. That's not, there are a lot of people who are perfectly happy in good relationships. So it's not true.
Yes, maybe it would sound funny, but I need to talk to my 8-year old and then say to him what you just said. It was like anger. She was upset. She didn't mean for you to be a lonely person. She wants for you to be happy. She was just upset at that moment. Don't take it literally. But yeah,
That is actually part of the quadrinity process, where you sit down with your emotional child. What did you learn? Who did you learn it from? Is it true?
now we have the tools as adults. We have the tools to say actually no, that is not true. You know, that's or at least that's not a universal truth.
But it can become a uh, self-fulfilling prophecy. If we believe it, we go toward the direction of our beliefs, even when they're damaging to us, even when we can see that they're damaging to us. It's as if we're compelled to do that. And we need to take control. We need to understand we have choices about what we do, and we can choose not to follow that path.
Takes courage though, like to stand up, like you were talking about women, to stand up and just don't let the like the things like the business as usual. Let's stop that and let's make a change and let's make it better and let's move forward. So it takes courage to do that, I think.
And persistence. Yeah, you need courage to start it, but you need persistence to keep at it. And that's why you need a support network. Because when you falter with energy, somebody else is there to help bolster you up. And whether that support network is a group of people, a friend, a counselor, a coach, it's just, it's very hard to do things on your own.
And then I'm curious. So, in the workplace nowadays, we've seen, so 79% of all of us have either depression, anxiety, or simply burnout, meaning the majority of people are simply not happy in the workplace, or yeah, like, what's your position about that? Is that something we can work, like we can tackle, I guess, somehow, depression, burnout in the workplace?
Well, one, we need managers who know how to manage. And by saying that, I mean that they know how to create a supportive, welcoming, encouraging environment. Some of us get depressed and anxious and nervous or burnt out because we're being thrown into the deep end of the pool. We're not given the training or the resources or the support or the recognition for what we're doing, and that makes it seem worthless or gets us very angry, and then we turn that anger inward with depression. Why am I letting myself be victimized, but I'm still victimized? So I think there's that. There's employee assistance programs that can provide counseling and assistance and support and resources for people who are floundering and are not sure where to get help. Um, I just listened to, and I wish I could remember the name of the man, but yesterday he was talking about the fact that under the Disabilities Act, people who are severely depressed can be covered, which I never knew. And covered meaning to get accommodation, whether it's a flexible time so that they can see a therapist, or flexible times so that they can relax and rest and get healthier. Um, there's a lot out there that I think a lot of us don't know anything about that could help us, and it's worth asking. So if um, their human resources manager or staff should hopefully be able to point them in the right direction if an employee assistance program isn't available.
And sometimes you don't even know, like you don't even know that you're leading towards burnout. You don't even know that you have this anxiety burning deep inside. So it's not like even the company doesn't know, but you also don't know. And the first question, I think, would be just to be true to yourself and ask, am I truly happy and enjoying this? Of course, it's a task, it's a job. That's why I'm getting paid for it. Like, yes, I understand that part, but still, am I happy with the people I work with? Is this environment good for me? And because I don't have the answers and the tools, then I can jump to from job to job, and that's why millennials nowadays, they don't last more than 7 months in one position, because they don't feel they're making any impact, they don't feel fulfilled, and then they leave. But the thing is that we've been working, so people worked in places for 20, 30 years, and we don't have that patience and that persistence today. as a generation. So maybe, and this is me just ranting, but maybe the first question to ask is to yourself: uh, Am I do, am I being anxious here? Uh, am I depressed? Am I, you know, um, but that. Do you think that that's the case that has something to do with it?
Looking at it from the other side, a manager can see, uh, if they want to, the symptoms, more absences, lack of productivity, lack of participation in meetings, uh, the quality of the work going down, the quantity of the work going down. You know, it can be pretty obvious. Or we see the opposite, the person working ungodly hours, throwing themselves into work, which also is a way for avoiding recognizing the person who's doing it is doing it so that they don't have to think about how unhappy they are, what else they need. My That was my response to stress. Work harder, because I believe that I was. Gloria Steinem said, "We're not a human doing, we're a human being." But a lot of us get our value from what we do. So if we're not happy in our home life, for example, we'll throw ourselves into our work and we will burn out. Um, but I think your question is, how do we ourselves recognize when it's happening? And I think when we don't want to get out of bed in the morning and we say, well, it's just that I'm tired. Well, is that a physical tired or is that an emotional tired? And for a lot of us, that's an emotional tired. And I'm really interested, Pablo, at your 79% or whatever it is that you said, because now with the great resignation or the great reallocation, people are acting on what they feel would be healthier for themselves. So I'm wondering if that statistic is no longer accurate.
Would be interesting to revisit that. Not sure if they already have a new one in place. I, I think they do, uh, but it's worth taking a look at it. Absolutely.
I mean, because that's really what's going on right now. People have decided, I was home. This is a better place for me. I work better here. It's more comfortable. I don't have to worry about childcare or commuting. Uh, or I realize that I'm not being paid what I think I'm worth or doing what I like to do, and I'm going to find a job where I can.
So true. So many things. So many things changed the last 2 years. That the stats they changed. I think as well. So
Yeah.
and so is there I was impacted by how like actually your leadership, if it's good, can actually spot that those trends, and an employee being, or a friend or whatever, being overproductive or not being there. Like, is there a good or a recommended, this is very quote unquote, is there a recommended mindset you need to develop to be happy at your place? Because I think it's very unlikely that you find the job of your dreams, because at some point the job will be tedious. You're tired. You prefer to do something else. So even though it's something you looked forward to, at some point it's job, right?
Let me tell you a story. And I was told this by someone who was there. There used to be a company called Parker Pen in Janesville, Wisconsin, and they were doing a tour of the company, and they make pens. Okay, and they were going down the line, where people were soldering things and thus and so, and they got to the end, and there was a woman seated on a bench with two boxes, and in one box were the little clips that go on a pen, and the other box was the pen with the clip on it. And they asked her, since they had asked everybody else what they were doing, they asked her, totally expecting she was going to say, well, I put the stupid clips on the pens. But that's not what she said. What she said was, I'm responsible for the image of Parker Pen. Because if these clips aren't buffed so that they shine, and if they're not on exactly straight, then the person who puts it in their lapel pocket is not going to look good. And that's not the image we want for Parker Pen. And I was in awe that someone took the time to say to her, you're important. What you do is important. And so she can go to that job with great pride. And she's absolutely right. I was working with a restaurant here in Madison, Wisconsin, and um, they were having a problem with transients in the dishwashers. Okay. It's a dirty job, it's a hot job, it's not a very fulfilling job. But when you go to a restaurant and you sit down, what's the first thing you look at before you look at the menu?
What, like the scenery, the tables,
The silverware.
silverware.
Look at the silverware and you look at the glasses. And if there's on those things, it doesn't matter how fancy the restaurant, how wonderful the food, you don't want to eat there. They're responsible for the image and the success of the restaurant. Now, if you tell them that and you also give them parts of the tips, right? It's different. It's different. So I think it would be great if managers would have that conversation with anybody who works for them so that they understand why they're valued and that they're valued and that it makes a difference. Because ultimately, we all want to make a difference. We all want to feel that we are doing something worthwhile. And if the manager can't help us see that, then maybe we need help from somebody else to see that, to think about, all right, what is it that I'm doing that makes a difference? And if somebody can do it for dishwashers and for somebody putting pens together, think it'd be a lot easier to do it for teachers, for almost anybody.
That's a great story. Yeah, they've never saw it, from that angle. Like, because you get used to of like you need to get a job, you need to pay the bills, so you go do this and then go home and then rest and then yes, pay the bills. It's not like that mindset of this is the changing you're doing, this is the impact behind your task. It's not just the task, it's the purpose and the meaning. It reminded me of a book I always quote, I think. uh, yeah, I always quote it, which is Man's Search for a Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And actually the meaning like reshapes and gives you purpose in whatever it is you're doing. And he was in the war as a slave, as a not a slave, but almost. I mean, he was having a rough time. His family was killed, and he managed to like still go out, write a book, and create the logotherapy. But anyway, that sense of purpose and meaning, I think, is so key. You're so right. And so going back to to your business, what would you have, what would you like to have known before starting or writing about, like, or having conversations about, assertiveness, confidence in the workplace? What would you have known back in the 70s that you know today?
About assertiveness particularly, or just business in general?
Oh, I mean, your work. I think it's more about assertiveness, conflict management, time management, about the work you do, something that
Mhm.
you know now, you wish you've known back then. I'm not talking about like the changes between the 70s and today, but like the human behavior and, you know, like connecting with people. Yeah.
That's a hard one for me to answer for some reason. What would have helped me when I started was to know that I was good at it, that I would be good at it, that I would make a difference. Because at the beginning, you don't know. Um, that I would make mistakes, but I could learn from them, which is a really important thing because so many of us beat ourselves up over mistakes we made. And I'm not saying I'm past that, but it would have been good to know you're going to make mistakes and it's okay. You'll get past those. Um, it would have been helpful for me to know that we're social beings and we need social support because I didn't have that. And that's why I talk about how it's so important to have it. I really didn't. I think that's my answer to your question.
And about those mistakes, how do you bounce back from those challenging situations? Like, is there something you do, or yeah, or something?
Well, first, you have to forgive yourself because you're a human. Second, you have to have a sense of humor. I'll tell you a story about that. I was training during the day in Madison, and then I had a class I did in the evening, and then I drove 3 hours for a workshop I was going to do the next day. And this was before PowerPoint, so I had uh, transparencies that were colored. And I also, at that time, used to drink a lot of Diet Coke. Well, they didn't, the Coke exploded, got over all the overheads. I spent all night redoing them and drying them. So I didn't get any sleep. And then in the morning, my gold bracelet fell down the toilet. I was not having a good day. So I was supposed to do strategic planning with a group had that of men, and they were all men who'd flown in from around the country. And as I'm being introduced to them, I tripped and I landed in the lap of the CEO. Now, I had not been having a good day, but what I said as I struggled off the lap of this obviously confused young, older man, I said, if you're really good and we get done early, I'll sit in all your laps. You have to have a sense of humor. I mean, I have made lots of mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not trying, you're not doing anything new. So it's going to happen, and some of them you don't come back from. You lose a client. You lose your sense of self for a little while. But if you come back, they talk about what's your why. Simon's Sinek talks about what's your why. I never thought about it as my why, but I always thought about, all right, how do I do the best that I can? And that's all I can do, the best that I can. And if it didn't work in a situation, well, it was the best I could do. And could I learn from that situation? Yeah. Maybe what I learned is don't put yourself in that situation again. or or I learned next time I'll approach it this way.
So Deb, I want to be mindful of your time. I know we were almost at the hour, but this it was a lovely conversation, and I wanted to ask maybe where do we find you online and final comments.
Well, I have two businesses. One is Laurel and Associates, and that's Laurel and Associates. And I have web, and the other is the Peer Learning Institute, Peer PEER Learning Institute, which are both online. I'm also on LinkedIn as Deborah Laurel, and that's how they can find me.
All right, I'll leave the links in the description. Please make sure to visit and to connect with Deborah. And Deb, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your stories. Uh, you're such an amazing person. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Glad to hear that. Take care. Bye bye.